January 31st, 1921. Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. The graveyard of the Atlantic. A US Coast Guard station receives a report from a passing ship. There's a five-masted schooner stranded on the treacherous Diamond Shoals. The vessel is listing badly, her sail still partially set, clearly in distress. But something's wrong. No distress signals, no crew visible on deck, no response to radio calls. When a rescue team finally reaches the ship 4 days later, delayed by brutal winter storms, they find something impossible. The ship is the Carroll A. Deering, a massive commercial schooner out of Virginia, and she's completely abandoned. The crew's dinner is still on the table in the galley, the food only partially eaten. Navigation charts are spread across the captain's desk. Personal belongings are in the crew quarters. Lifeboat davits show the boats were launched deliberately, not torn away by storm. But the ship's log is missing. The navigation equipment has been smashed, and all 11 crew members, experienced sailors, including the captain, are gone. No bodies are ever found. No lifeboats are recovered. No distress message is ever received. For over 100 years, investigators have tried to explain what happened to the crew of the Carroll A. Deering. The theories range from mutiny to piracy, from Bermuda Triangle phenomena to Soviet agents, from a perfect storm to a rum-running conspiracy. But every theory has a fatal flaw, a piece of evidence that doesn't fit, a question that can't be answered. This is the Carroll A. Deering, the five-masted ghost ship that ran aground with her secrets. The mystery that still haunts the Carolina coast a century later. Welcome to 404 Mystery Found, where we investigate history's greatest unanswered questions. So settle in. What you are about to hear is not a campfire story. These are documented forensic mysteries where every clue leads to a dead end, and every answer only raises a darker question. Act 1. The ship, the captain, and the voyage. The Carroll A. Deering was not some ancient cursed vessel. She was a modern, well-built ship with a professional crew on a routine commercial voyage, which makes what happened to her even more baffling. The ship, the Carroll A. Deering, was built in 1919 at the G.G. Deering Company shipyard in Bath, Maine. She was named after the son of the shipyard's owner, William Deering. She was a five-masted schooner, one of the largest wooden sailing vessels built during that era. She measured 255 feet long, with a cargo capacity of over 2,100 tons. 5 towering masts carried massive canvas sails that could catch even the lightest wind. She was built for the coal trade, transporting coal from Virginia down the East Coast to South American ports, then returning with cargo like lumber, sugar, or general freight. In 1919 and 1920, the Carroll A. Deering completed several successful voyages. She was considered a reliable, seaworthy vessel. Her owners had no complaints. She was profitable. In August 1920, she was chartered for a voyage from Norfolk, Virginia to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. She would carry a cargo of coal south, then return with a load of freight. It was meant to be a routine trip. 4 months, round trip, easy money. But from the very beginning, this voyage was troubled. The captain, William Merritt. The ship's regular captain was unavailable, so the shipping company hired Captain William Merritt, a 66-year-old veteran sailor with over 40 years of experience at sea. But Merritt was not well. His health was declining. He had recently suffered from what was described as rheumatism, likely arthritis or another chronic condition. Friends and family urged him not to take the voyage. He was too old, too sick. Merritt needed the money. He accepted the command. He brought his son, Sewell Merritt, as first mate. Sewell was an experienced sailor in his own right, but some crew members later reported tension between father and son. Sewell allegedly felt his father was too old and sick to command the ship properly. The rest of the crew was assembled in Norfolk in August 1920. In total, 11 men. Captain William Merritt, first mate Sewell Merritt, the captain's son. Second mate, name lost to history. Engineer, cook, 6 able-bodied seamen. One detail would later become significant. The captain and the first mate did not get along with one of the seamen, a man named Charles B. McClellan. Witnesses in port reported hearing arguments between McClellan and the officers. The nature of the dispute is unclear, but it was serious enough that McClellan was nearly dismissed before the voyage even began. He stayed on. That decision may have sealed everyone's fate. The voyage begins. On August 20th, 1920, the Carroll A. Deering departed Norfolk, Virginia, loaded with coal bound for Rio de Janeiro. The voyage south was uneventful. The ship made one stop in Barbados in early September to take on supplies and fresh water. Then she continued to Rio, arriving in mid-September 1920. In Rio, something happened. Captain William Merritt fell seriously ill. His chronic health problems worsened. He became bedridden. A doctor examined him and declared him unfit to command the return voyage. The shipping company scrambled to find a replacement captain. They hired Captain Willis B. Wormel, an experienced 60-year-old sailor who happened to be in Rio at the time. Wormel took command. Captain Merritt and his son Sewell were sent home on a passenger steamer. They arrived back in the United States safely. Wormel now commanded a ship with a crew he didn't know, on a route he hadn't planned, with men who might be loyal to the previous captain, or not. On December 2, 1920, the Carroll A. Deering departed Rio de Janeiro, heading north back toward Norfolk with a cargo of lumber and hides. She would never reach home. The final sightings. The Carroll A. Deering made one final documented stop, Barbados, on January 9, 1921. She took on supplies and water. Captain Wormel filed a report with the harbour master, noting all was well. The ship was in good condition, no problems. But something strange happened in Barbados. A local sailor named John Hughes later claimed he was approached by a crew member from the Deering in a Barbados tavern. The crew member, whose name Hughes couldn't recall, was drunk and agitated. He told Hughes something disturbing. He said the captain was sick or drunk or not in control. He said something was wrong on the ship. He wanted to get off, but he couldn't. I didn't think much of it at the time. Sailors complain. But later I wondered, was he trying to warn someone? End of quote. Hughes reported this conversation to authorities after the ship was found abandoned, but by then it was too late. On January 23rd, 1921, the Carroll A. Deering was spotted off the coast of Cape Fear, North Carolina, by the Cape Lookout Lightship, a stationary vessel that served as a navigational aid. A crew member on the lightship observed the Deering and noted something odd. A man on deck shouted something to the lightship using a megaphone. The lightship crew couldn't understand the message clearly, but it sounded urgent. The man shouted that the ship had lost her anchors and needed assistance. But then the Deering sailed away before the lightship could respond or send help. This sighting is crucial for two reasons. The crew was alive and on board on January 23rd. Something was already wrong. They'd lost their anchors and were asking for help. 8 days later, the ship was found abandoned. Act 2, The Discovery, She's a Ghost Ship, January 31st, 1921, 9 a.m. The captain of a passing steamer, the Lake Elon, radios the U.S. Coast Guard at Cape Hatteras. Large schooner stranded on Diamond Shoals, 5 masts, no visible crew, requires immediate assistance. Diamond Shoals is one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the U.S. East Coast. It's a shifting sandbar extending miles offshore from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Hundreds of ships have wrecked there. It's part of what sailors call the graveyard of the Atlantic. The Carroll A. Deering was hard aground on the shoals, listing to one side, her sails still partially set but torn by wind. She was stuck fast. The Coast Guard wanted to reach her immediately, but the weather was brutal. High winds, rough seas. It was too dangerous to launch a rescue boat. For 4 agonizing days, the Deering sat stranded in full view of the coast, while storms battered the Carolina shore. Coast Guard officers watched through telescopes, waiting for a break in the weather. They saw no movement on the ship, no crew, no signals. On February 4th, 1921, the weather finally calmed enough for a boarding party to launch. The boarding. A Coast Guard cutter approached the Carroll A. Deering cautiously. The boarding party, 6 men, climbed onto the tilted deck. Let me describe what they found based on the official Coast Guard report filed in February 1921. The deck. The ship's deck was in disarray. Lines were tangled. Some sails were torn, others still set, as if the crew had been trying to sail the ship. Rigging was intact but poorly maintained. There was no one on deck, no bodies, no signs of a struggle. The lifeboats were missing. The davits, the cranes that hold lifeboats, showed the boats had been launched properly, not torn away by waves. The galley. This is where things became eerie. The galley table was set for a meal. Plates, cups, and utensils were laid out. Some plates had food still on them, partially eaten. A pot sat on the cold stove with remnants of what appeared to be stew or soup. It looked as if the crew had been interrupted mid-meal. The crew quarters. Personal belongings were still in the crew's bunks. Clothing, books, tobacco pipes. Everything a sailor would take if abandoning ship, left behind. One officer later testified, it was as if they'd stood up from dinner and just walked off the ship. Nothing was packed, nothing was taken. It was like they vanished in the middle of their routine. End of quote. The captain's cabin. Navigation charts were spread across the captain's desk. Some showed the ship's route up the east coast. Others were marked with pencil notations. But here's where it gets strange. The ship's log was missing. Every ship is required to keep a daily log of position, weather, and events. The Deering's log was gone, and the navigation equipment, sextants, chronometers, compasses, was smashed. Not damaged by the grounding, deliberately destroyed. Someone had taken a heavy object and shattered the delicate instruments, the cargo hold. The cargo, lumber and hides from Brazil, was intact and properly secured. No theft, no water damage beyond what the grounding had caused. The ship's papers. All official documents were missing. The log, the ship's registry, the crew manifest, cargo receipts, everything. Gone. The questions begin. The Coast Guard boarding party searched every compartment. No crew, no bodies, no blood, no signs of violence, except for the deliberately destroyed navigation equipment. The Coast Guard commander filed his report on February 5, 1921. His conclusion: the vessel appears to have been deliberately abandoned by her crew under circumstances unknown. The destruction of navigation instruments suggests either mutiny or piracy. The absence of ship's papers indicates an attempt to conceal the ship's identity or route. The crew's fate is unknown. End of quote. The Carroll A Deering sat on Diamond Shoals for 2 more months, while salvage companies assessed whether she could be refloated. She couldn't. The grounding had damaged her hull too severely. In March 1921, the ship was declared a total loss. Salvage teams stripped her of anything valuable: masts, rigging, hardware. Then they abandoned her to the sea. By May 1921, storms had broken her apart. The wreck scattered across the shoals and sank, but the mystery of her crew had only just begun. Act 3. The investigation, theories and suspicions. The disappearance of the Carroll A Deering became a national news story in 1921. The US Department of Commerce launched an official investigation. The FBI got involved. The Navy was consulted. Over the next 2 years, investigators pursued multiple theories. Let's examine each one. Theory number 1: mutiny. This was the first and most obvious theory. The crew mutinied against Captain Wormel, killed him, abandoned ship, and fled. Evidence supporting mutiny. Captain Wormel was a last-minute replacement. The crew didn't know him and may not have respected his authority. Witnesses in Barbados reported a crew member complaining that the captain was not in control. The navigation equipment was deliberately destroyed, an act of sabotage. The ship's papers were taken, suggesting the crew wanted to hide their identities and prevent pursuit. The lifeboats were deliberately launched, not torn away by storm. The scenario: the crew, led by a disgruntled seaman, possibly Charles McClellan, the man who'd argued with the previous captain, overpowered Captain Wormel. They killed him, or held him captive, and took control of the ship. They sailed north, but as they approached the dangerous waters off Cape Hatteras, they realized they couldn't navigate properly without the captain. The ship ran aground. In a panic, they destroyed the navigation equipment to cover their tracks, took the ship's papers, launched the lifeboats, and fled to shore. Problem with this theory: no bodies were ever found. If they killed the captain, where is his body? Why take it with them? If the crew mutinied and fled to shore, where did they go? None of the 11 men were ever seen again, not one. Mutineers typically steal valuables. The cargo was untouched. Personal belongings were left behind. Why smash the navigation equipment? If they were fleeing, they'd need it. The mutiny theory explains some evidence, but not all of it. Theory number 2: piracy. In the 1920s, piracy was not a relic of the past. Prohibition had created a massive black market for smuggled rum from the Caribbean. Pirates and smugglers operated along the East Coast, hijacking ships and stealing cargo. Could the Carroll A Deering have been attacked by pirates? Evidence supporting piracy. The ship's papers were taken. Pirates would want to hide evidence. the navigation equipment was destroyed, possibly to prevent the crew from signaling for help or navigating to safety. The crew vanished. Pirates could have killed them and dumped the bodies overboard. The ship was near known smuggling routes. The scenario: pirates intercepted the Deering off the Carolina coast. They boarded, overpowered the crew, and intended to sail the ship to a hidden cove to offload the cargo. But they were inexperienced sailors. They ran the ship aground on Diamond Shoals. Realizing the ship was stuck and a Coast Guard station was nearby, they abandoned her and fled in their own boat, taking the crew as prisoners or killing them. Problems with this theory: the cargo wasn't stolen. Why would pirates attack a ship and not take the valuable lumber and hides? Pirates would strip the ship of valuables, tools, supplies, personal belongings. Nothing was taken. Why destroy navigation equipment? Pirates would want it for their own use. If the crew was killed, why no blood? Why no bodies? Piracy explains the abandonment, but not the untouched cargo or the lack of violence. Theory 3. The Bermuda Triangle. In the decades after the Carroll A. Deering disappearance, the area where she was found became famous for something else: the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is a loosely defined region of the Atlantic Ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where ships and aircraft have allegedly disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The Deering was found just outside this area, but close enough that some researchers have linked her to Bermuda Triangle phenomena. The paranormal theories: magnetic anomalies caused navigation equipment to fail, leading the ship to ground. Time distortions or dimensional portals caused the crew to vanish. Underwater methane eruptions created confusion or panic. Extraterrestrial involvement. Problems with these theories: they're unfalsifiable. You can't prove or disprove them. They explain everything by invoking the unexplainable. And more importantly, investigators found no evidence of supernatural phenomena. The ship grounded on a well-known sandbar. The navigation equipment was physically smashed by human hands. The lifeboats were deliberately launched. This wasn't a mysterious vanishing. It was an abandonment. Theory 4. The Soviet agent theory. This theory sounds like a spy novel, but it was taken seriously by investigators in 1921. In 1921, the Soviet Union was newly formed. The Bolshevik Revolution had just occurred. The United States was in the middle of the Red Scare, a period of intense fear of communist infiltration. Some investigators believed Soviet agents were operating along the US East Coast, sabotaging ships to destabilize American commerce. The theory: Soviet agents had infiltrated the crew of the Carroll A. Deering or boarded her at sea. They killed the captain, destroyed the navigation equipment, and scuttled the ship to damage American shipping. They then escaped in the lifeboats and disappeared into the network of communist sympathizers in the US. Evidence, circumstantial at best. Several ships mysteriously disappeared or were found abandoned along the East Coast in 1920 and 1921. Leading to speculation of coordinated sabotage. The deliberate destruction of navigation equipment suggested sabotage, not accident. The crew's complete disappearance suggested a planned operation. Problems with this theory: no evidence of Soviet involvement was ever found. Why target a coal and lumber freighter? If sabotaging commerce, why not target military or strategic vessels? If this was an operation, why ground the ship so publicly? a covert operation would sink the ship, not strand it in view of the coast. This theory was investigated extensively by federal authorities and dismissed. Act 4. The connections and the cluster. Here's where the Carroll A. Deering case becomes even stranger. She was not the only ship to vanish or be found abandoned in early 1921. Between December 1920 and June 1921, a 6-month period, at least 9 ships disappeared or were found abandoned under mysterious circumstances along the US East Coast and in the Caribbean. This cluster of incidents led investigators to believe something was systematically happening, whether piracy, sabotage, or natural phenomena. The other ships, let me list them. 1. The SS Hewitt, December 1920. Disappeared with crew of 42 between Sabine, Texas and New York. Never found. 2. The SS Esperanza, January 1921. Vanished with crew near Bermuda. No wreckage found. 3. The Carroll A. Deering, January 31st, 1921. Found abandoned off Cape Hatteras. 4. The SS Cotopaxi, December 1920. Vanished with crew of 32 en route from Charleston to Havana. Never found. This ship would later become famous in Bermuda Triangle lore. 5. The Crescent, February 1921. Small schooner found abandoned near Barbados, crew missing, and others. This led to 2 major government investigations: the US Department of Commerce Maritime Investigation, 1921 to 1922, a special Congressional inquiry, 1922. Both investigations concluded, no single explanation fits all cases. Some were likely victims of storms. Some may have been piracy. 1 or 2 may have been sabotage. But there was no evidence of a coordinated conspiracy. The cluster was likely a tragic coincidence, a perfect storm of bad luck, bad weather, and dangerous waters. The lightship communication. Remember the sighting of the Carroll A. Deering by the Cape Lookout lightship on January 23, 1921. Investigators focused intensely on that encounter. The lightship crew reported a man on the Deering shouted that the ship had lost her anchors. Why is this significant? Losing anchors in a storm is not catastrophic. It's inconvenient, but not life-threatening. Yet the crew member was shouting urgently, as if something was seriously wrong. Some investigators believed the man was trying to send a coded distress signal, that he couldn't speak freely because he was being watched or coerced. Others believe he was simply reporting a problem and asking for help, and the ship then sailed on because Captain Wormel decided to continue rather than wait for assistance. We'll never know, because 8 days later, the ship was abandoned. You've been listening to 404 Mystery Found. Thank you so much for tuning in this far. Subscribe so you won't miss our next mystery. Until next time.